A very good evening now to all the distinguished dignitaries present here. Our Padma Bhushan awardee and a national pride, Bindeshwar Ji, Pathak Ji, he's been a pride of India, converting waste to wealth. My distinguished colleagues here, Dr. Vivek Bandyopadhyay, Mr. Popley, Mr. Prabjot Ji, Sodhi Saab, Professor Saab, our distinguished Dean from the Petroleum University, and the heart and soul of this event, Govt Saab. Our other distinguished participants, it's been 2 days of very exciting and very illuminating discussions. What begins well does well. And the inauguration was a very thumping session addressed by Union Cabinet Minister for Water Resources and the Minister for Renewable Energy. The message was clear that the nation, along with the rest of the world, is on the move to transiting from the old fossil fuel economy to the renewable economy, and that was the theme of the conference. The other issue is water resources. Now, these two have been married together. Garg Saab had married petroleum and coal earlier. Now he's brought about a marriage of renewable energy and water also. Because it is basically integrated thinking in today's environment. What is the problem? Today, largely in government, I've spent a lifetime working there. And I used to say that we work in silos. Luckily, some of us who worked in the Indian Administrative Service moved across a diverse range of departments. So you knew about the working and the needs of another sector. And while taking a view in a sector where you're working, you also had the advantage of seeing the other sector's point of view. Now, this precisely is human existence and human relationship. You have to bother as much about your neighbor as your own self. And that really is good living or good habitation. We suddenly started talking about environment, pollution, everything. Now, all this stems from the fact that, say, not in my backyard, a term which came in from the nuclear energy sphere, that I don't want radioactive waste in my backyard. I don't push it into my neighbor. Now, we are not only pushing things into our neighbor, we are pushing things onto the next generation. The crisis, we are landing on the next generation. It is like the head of a family building up huge debts and leaving them to be discharged by the next generation. So these are the kind of debts that we have built up, the price of profligacy, leading very, very lavish lifestyles, unsustainable lifestyles in short. We have the privilege of having Bindeshwar Ji with us today, who has actually translated that oft-repeated slogan of waste to wealth. Now, till you exhibit it, I don't think the mission is complete through bhashan only. He's done it. There was talk also, our colleagues, of circular economy. Circular is precisely the kind of thing that he is advocating, waste to wealth. And that wealth will again be converted probably to waste and then again to wealth. So this is what makes, in my view, any concept truly circular. It comes back to you. So whatever mess we create in our lifetimes sometimes comes back to us in our own lifetime, but certainly comes back to future generations. And that is precisely what we are going through. And I think the age-old, I am not a man learned in scriptures, but what I understand of karma, that they have to, your karmas revisit you. Now when and where, in this generation, or as I said, in future generations. There is need to talk together. Each one of us today is virtually watching television, reading newspapers, and bombarded with news and views. But unfortunately, most of it is paid and sponsored. So it is tainted with the interest of whoever is investing in that news being put across to us. That purity and sanctity of news and views is today lost. Well, people look upon me as an energy man because I started working with the Department of Atomic Energy in the government, then worked in power, worked in petroleum, also worked in water resources as Principal Secretary in my state. So I've been a rolling stone. But I can tell you that the sanctity and purity of news which was reaching you is all by and large paid news today. Somebody has paid for it to appear. Either through the medium through which it is coming, which gives it that color of dye which they want, that shade of green or shade of red or shade of blue, almost like the colors of hydrogen that we are talking about today without having seen it. So these are all the invisible actors getting across to you. The good point about events like this is that we talk face to face with each other. The sincerity of the views comes across. Long years ago, 5, 6 years, I've served as head of the information in the state, as head of department and secretary and press secretary to the chief ministers. So I was called upon to open some faculties on communication for Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan before I entered into the energy sphere, always in an honorary capacity. Communication is always a two-way exercise. Unfortunately, the mediums that I was telling you about, the newspaper, the TV, today the phone that we read, it is not a two-way information exchange. It's just one way. And that is not communication. That is only what you call in English a communique. It's not communication. Here, we got to talk to each other, interact with each other, that view to bounce back to us. And across generations, it is this younger generation, some of it, who's sitting here, who are concerned with what the future is going to be. We are only disclosing the debts that you will have to discharge to you. And like an old man in the family, your grandfather, trying to tell you, okay, try and work it out this way. But the load has to be carried by this generation. And I think this generation, you see, unfortunately, what I find is that your human interaction is decreasing. You are prisoners of IT. And that two-way communication, the feeling for the fellow citizen, actually feeling what he's going through. Now online classes, online work, you do not know the pain and misery of the other person. My generation had to travel to schools and colleges in buses. So we knew what crowded buses meant and what changing of buses and etc. if you were in a large city like Delhi or Bombay or something. So that struggle begins early. The subjects today and the declaration has tried to give you a charter of action that you have to do for the future. A little advice, if somebody in the government is prepared to read it or listen to it, what are the problems? And how sitting outside the governmental structure of governance and absolute authority, you know what is the need of the hour. I have sat in those high spaces and I know what ivory towers can mean, the term ivory towers. The channels of communication are very limited at the top. And those are more successful in their work who keep those channels of communication open. They are the durable and sustainable variety. Otherwise, as we say the Hindu term, hukamran, they come and go. So these events bring reality to you, bring the other's viewpoint to you, the patience to be able to listen to the other viewpoint, give your own viewpoint, and realize that there is a problem, and also discover that there is a solution. But there's a cost to everything. And the problem of the water sector, in my view, having worked in it, is that water is not priced, unfortunately, in our country adequately or appropriately. So we tend to waste it. We tend to contaminate it. Till energy is priced, you do not know how to use it economically. So this is modern commerce giving a price to things. We value a thing if it is in the house, if it is expensive. If we haven't paid much for it, we don't care for it by and large. Though it may not be of much use to you. Something which is of daily use to you, but it doesn't cost that much, you don't care that much for it. So pricing is an indicator of how much you ought to use of that commodity and what value you give it. It has to be preserved for future generations. Energy has to be produced. The environment has to be preserved. Water has to be preserved. And most importantly, this human civilization, not only those two-legged ones like you and me, but also the animal life, the plant life. Each one of them contributes to what is a happy living space or a happy home. And I think if we can go back with that message that we must learn to live not only for ourselves, but also for others, not only for the present generation, but also for the future, a lot of problems will be solved. Thank you very much for listening out.